Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation and discussion about the Civil War amendments, which were three important changes to the U.S. Constitution that guaranteed the rights and liberties that African Americans across the country were denied for so long. To begin, I'll discuss the historical context for each of the amendments that we'll discuss today. So to start off, we'll discuss the 13th Amendment. So the first section reads, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime, whether the parties shall have duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. By the time this amendment had passed, slavery had existed in the United States for over 246 years. Despite this, a growing movement to abolish this particular institution marked the early history of the country. During the time of the Articles of Confederation, the first U.S. Constitution, the Confederation Congress, the first legislature, passed the 1847 Northwest Ordinance, which banned slavery in the Northwest Territory, which would become some of the states in the Midwest, so Ohio, Illinois, Michigan. The importation of slaves was protected in the current Constitution for over 20 years. But by 1808, Congress passed a law that banned the practice. As well, northern states had passed laws that either gradually or immediately emancipated slaves within their borders. The Missouri Compromise attempted to keep the number of free and slave states equal, but laws such as the Fugitive Slave Act, which allowed southern plantation owners to send slave catchers into the north to bring back escaped slaves, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed territorial governments, not Congress, the ability to set their status as free or slave, caused the Civil War. Throughout the Civil War, Union troops' rank numbers grew due to escaping slaves, prompting President Lincoln to declare all slaves in the territories in rebellion against the United States to be free with the Emancipation Proclamation. However, these areas had to be taken under control by the U.S. military. And for places such as Texas, it wasn't until June 19, 1865, when this emancipation order was carried out, starting the first celebrations of what we'll now know as the holiday of Juneteenth. The amendment was ratified on December 6, 1865. The 14th Amendment. All persons born and naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state where they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law that abridges the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of liberty, life, liberty, or property without the due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The 14th Amendment finally cleared up several issues regarding the citizenship of African Americans. The question was first debated with the 3/5 Compromise during the Constitutional Convention, which was answered by allowing the southern states to count 60% or 3/5 of their slave populations into their population totals, giving them increased membership in the House of Representatives without giving slaves the right to vote. The question was left in legal ambiguity after that point, with some states giving African Americans some rights of citizenship, whether free or escaped, and others giving African Americans no rights at all. The question was again tackled with Dred Scott versus Stanford, where a slave was sued by the Missouri government, who wanted freedom since his owner took him to the Missouri Territory, which was free. However, the Supreme Court ruled against him, saying that African Americans, whether free or enslaved, were not citizens of the United States. This decision angered many, helping to lead into the Civil War. The amendment was ratified on July 28, 1868. The 15th Amendment. The right of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of race, color, or previous condition or servitude. The right to vote for African Americans was a long battle to win. Before the Civil War, some jurisdictions allowed African Americans to vote, but with the Dred Scott decision and the failure of New York State to pass a law allowing African Americans to vote, this led again into the Civil War. After the Civil War, though, Congress took over took over control of the states that rebelled against the Union, hoping to reconstruct them into better governments during the Reconstruction era. However, Congress came into conflict with the president during that time, President Andrew Johnson, who granted states passage into the Union again with their whole governments filled up with former Confederates and segregate discriminate and unequal representation. Congress often fought with the president in order to protect the rights of African Americans. So, with the 15th Amendment, they passed a law to make sure to enshrine in the Constitution that all African Americans will have their rights protected. Will have the right to vote to be protected as well. Due to several laws within these new states that known as black codes, which pretty much kept African Americans in an enslaved state, similar to that before the Civil War. Thank you, and I hope that you'll learn something new about learn something new about these amendments today. Thank you.
To recap, panel, what did the 13th Amendment do for us?
Can you state the question, please?
Yes, what was the 13th Amendment intended to do?
The 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was intended to abolish slavery and voluntary servitude, accepting punishment as a crime.
And when was it ratified?
It was ratified December 6, 1868. Oh, I'm sorry. December 6, 1865.
Anyone else? Were there any difficulties in ratifying the 13th Amendment?
Yes, there actually were difficulties in ratifying the 13th Amendment and after the ratification of the 13th Amendment, such as the codes and the different setbacks that the Southerns tried to due to African Americans, such as black codes, which were codes that prevented African Americans from getting equal rights in the South. Also, the North implemented a 3/5 compromise, which meant that slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person, meaning that it took 2 slaves to count as 1 person. The North did it because they didn't want the South to have more votes on the political level. It was more it was more political than it was personal. They would have more representatives on the political level, and they didn't want that for the South to have more representatives than the North. But it wasn't a personal act; it was just politics.
Anyone else want to add to that? The 14th Amendment, it was prepared to do what for us?
The 14th Amendment, it gave all people born and naturalized in the U.S. citizenship.
Anything else?
It was ratified on July 9th, 1868. So,
Were any problems ratifying the 14th Amendment?
There were problems ratifying the 14th Amendment, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1868, where African Americans were still continuing to fight for their civil rights to be counted as equal citizens in the United States, even though the 14th Amendment was already passed. They were still once again receiving setbacks from the southern states and the southern government.
What parts of the country did have most difficulty in ratifying the 14th Amendment, and why?
I would say that they had more difficulty with the southern states, and I would say it was why. The reason why is because that they were so used to having the slaves do their labor.
Anyone else?
As I explained above, before, when the Congress took control over the governments of the southern states, in order for them to be allowed to be admitted back into the Union, they had to pass the 14th and they had to pass the 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments, and both the governments were reconstructed. Basically, they were called to be reconstructive governments because during that time, laws were passed to make sure that African Americans could vote and could enter political office. However, some states really fought against that, and political offices had to be de-Confederate, Confederates had to be removed from office, other members of the government who sort of obstructed the rights of African Americans. And afterwards, when Union troops left the South, these governments were again overrun with white supremacists and segregationists and other and many others who restricted the rights of African Americans once more and kept African Americans in a state of second-class citizenship.
Any questions that we haven't asked that you want to share with us? Any information that you want to share with us that you haven't had an opportunity to about the 13th and 14th Amendment?
the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, which proclaimed freedom to the slaves in the 10 states that were still in rebellion.
Anyone else?
I would like to add on to what my colleague said. Those 9 states that were in rebellion were Mississippi, Texas, New Jersey, Delaware, Kentucky, California, Florida, Mississippi, and Texas.
When the amendment was ratified, who was president when they were ratifying the 13th and 14th Amendment?
Well, during the 13th Amendment, it was Abraham Lincoln before he, well, then he died, and his successor, Andrew Johnson, was the president through the 14th Amendment.
And after President Lincoln was ratified, after President Lincoln was assassinated, who took over for him?
Andrew Johnson, his successor.
Pardon?
Andrew Johnson, his successor.
And were there any conditions placed on the southern states for returning to the Union?
Yes, they had to, Congress laid out a plan for them to be readmitted into the Union. All the states in rebellion had to ratify the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment in order to rejoin the Union as well. They had to comply to standards set by Congress, such as protection of African American rights and the abolition of slavery, and African Americans had to be allowed to enter political office as well.
Anything else that was connected with the southern states' return to the Union?
Also, as we all may know, with the southern states trying to come back, with the northern trying to get the southern to come back as a union, we all know that the Civil War happened, which was the war between the southern and the northern, who were both fighting for who was gonna, if the North was fighting to grab the South and come back together as a union, and the South was fighting so that they could stay apart and stay with their own laws and their own rules.
And after the Civil War, what happened?
After the Civil War, the Northern won, and even though that the Northern won, and the North basically told the South that these are the rules, these are what you have to follow, the South still didn't really follow the rules. That's when the Black Codes and the 3/5 Compromise all came into play. They were saying, okay, we'll accept that we're all a part of the union, but we're still not going to treat African Americans the way that you guys want us to treat them. We'll treat them how we want to.
Is that what made the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment necessary?
It's what made the 13th, 14th, 15th. This is what made all the amendments necessary, yes. But with the amendments coming into place, it kind of angered the South, you could say, and that's when we started hearing about, that's when the South basically told the North we're gonna rebel, even though we've already had this war and everything. They still didn't really accept. They were still trying to do their own thing.
Anyone else?
Any questions?
The 3 amendments were necessary because the 13th Amendment abolished slavery and involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime in 1865. The 14th Amendment granted all African Americans equal rights and citizenship. The 15th Amendment deprived for anyone who wanted to vote, that anyone could vote whether their color, race, or previous situation of servitude. And these amendments shifted responsibility. For protecting rights for the federal government in case the states fail to do so.
Anyone else?
Any questions?
Again, any questions that we haven't asked that someone want to share with us about either amendment?
The question, we find that we believe that today, similar hostilities continue, in the United States, the hostile, realities which you have presented to us today following the Civil War. We continue to believe that, such difficulties exist for Africans here in America.
I actually do think that there are still difficulties for African Americans in America. For starters, in Mississippi, which was one of the states that didn't accept that slavery to be like completely free, as some of you may know, Mississippi actually didn't accept it until 2013. That's when they like really accepted that slavery was like no more and that it's banned in their state. So I do actually believe that there is still difficulties in southern states, but also more difficulties are coming up in northern states, as we know how in New York and all the places around the country, how African Americans are dying to the hands of Caucasians, they're dying to officers, random people on the street. It's just difficulties are coming up anywhere. At this point, it's not like it's only in the South anymore. It's more rising in the northern states as well.
I also think that the difficulties will come from things like more racist people coming out and becoming like head of the country. So when there's more people that's out here becoming more racist and showing that their racism is okay and that the head of our country is racist, then this will cause more problems for African Americans too.
Recent events should tell you they have a series of problems, as both my colleagues have shown. Systems, both certain states and certain social systems have kept African Americans down, as well with elections, especially like in Georgia and North Carolina. Many African Americans, many studies have shown targeted racial disenfranchisement for people of color. And in order for white Americans, in order to protect their power or their prestige, have basically gone on a campaign to stop certain groups that they don't want to vote, stop them from voting, and African Americans are included within these groups. And this is a very big issue because, as we know, the right to vote is very important. That you fought for so long to get to this point, and that all of these rights are now being contested. And in order for our voice to be heard, in order for our policies to be enacted, African Americans should work to make sure that all of us are enfranchised.
Yeah.
opportunity to vote. Before now, before the amendment, which amendment was that deals with voting? Okay. Before the 15th Amendment, they could not go to vote, and then when they could go to vote, there were tests given that they could not pass, and other conditions that disenfranchised them from being able to voice their opinion about any issue. What is the problem today?
Well, the clear issue is that, for most states, you have to go, register yourself to vote, and, you have to go register yourself to vote, and, state officials can immediately take that away. In some states, just, purge you from the voter rolls for absolutely no reason. As well, there's a big issue with, candidates, many candidates discussing about voter fraud, even though voter fraud is not a big problem. And they've, of course, called for increased, ID card laws where you have to show ID in order to vote. And for many African Americans, they don't have ID, or they just can't get ID or something. Finally, if you're a felon in many states, your right to vote is taken away or restricted. And as we know, African Americans are one of the most highly incarcerated racial groups in the country, and so that's a big problem there as well.
I would like to add on to what my colleague said. I think an issue with us voting today, it has to be our own willingness. You know, if you see somebody campaign that you don't like, you feel the need that, well, if I don't like them, I shouldn't vote for them. And I think it all has to do, well, not all of it, but most of it has to do with us actually wanting to get up and make a change, because nobody's gonna do it for us. They can't vote for us, so the key part is us actually getting out and doing something about it. If you don't want a person to win, not voting isn't the way to go. But unfortunately, some people think that that's the answer. So I think that plays a very large role in political events. And I think, you know, once you get the results and you didn't like that person, you feel upset, but you had an opportunity to change it. It's all about your willingness. You talk about white people, but you want them, you know, help you change, but you're not doing anything for yourself. And a lot of black people always talk about police brutality, not acknowledging that we also shoot our own selves in the street. It's things like that. You have to make your own change when it comes to voting, when it comes to violence, when it comes to anything. We're gonna have to work on ourselves before we expect anybody to help us.
I would also like to say that. Okay, I would also like to say that, I mean, our ancestors done worked so hard for us to have this opportunity to vote, and then us not being able to vote. I mean, well, us not taking, you know, the time to vote and actually respecting what they did for us and how hard they worked for us to actually make this law for us. It just makes it like.
Also, without people voting, they think of their vote as like one stick by itself, and you'll find that the people who don't vote are the main people complaining. So if you actually go and vote, they think of it as, oh, my one vote not gonna help, because they think of it as just one stick. When you have a bundle of sticks, it's gonna be harder to break. So everybody should go out and vote, and if you're not gonna vote, you shouldn't complain about who's gonna get in the office, because you didn't actually, you didn't participate or attempt to make a change.
I have a question with the voting. right now they say the legal age is 18 to register to vote. How would y'all feel if it was 16? Would y'all register? And what would make a teenager decide to want to be a part of where you're supposed to register to vote? That's supposed to be an adult thing. But as a teenager, you guys have rights and you guys have opinions and ideas that you want to bring to the forefront. So if they was to allow you in school to vote, how would y'all do that? Would y'all take advantage?
I would definitely take advantage of voting for somebody that I feel like should be in office, especially representing us in the U.S. You know, like we gotta have somebody that we feel like should be in office, and it shouldn't just be 18 and over. It should be people that do go with the Constitution and know what's going on about what's. You know what I'm saying?
Me personally, I know everybody is assuming that everybody would say yes, but me personally, I would think if they made the legal age 16 to vote, I don't think I would, mainly because I know at my age right now, my brain hasn't completely matured to something as big as voting for the President of the United States. So I believe that if my brain hasn't matured, then I'm pretty sure half the other 16-year-olds in the world's brains haven't matured. So I think if they did make the legal age 16, it'll honestly make the voting worse because they'll just vote just because they can, and the decisions won't be political. It'll just be, hey, I voted, thank you, I'm done. It's just like something just childish. So I think they shouldn't make the legal age 16 because it'll be pointless.
I'd like to add on to my colleague. I don't believe voting at the age of 16 is a good idea. At the age of 16, I'm not talking about you guys specifically, but 16-year-olds are very persuaded by the media. And if somebody likes this and they see it, they're gonna like it too automatically without thinking about it. Some 16-year-olds that I know, they don't think about political things like we do. I don't think we share the same political values. Some people think, well, if I don't know, if Barack Obama likes him, well, why shouldn't I? It's all about what's in the media because we're so easily persuaded. I think that the only way that I would, have them vote at such a young age is to, start talking about more political figures and start learning about who's doing what and what's happening